Hey students, welcome to another Mr. Ness screencast. Today's aim is World War II battles. Before you continue the video, make sure that you have handout 9.5 in front of you and something to write with. Let's start by reviewing the two sides that fought in World War II. On one side, we have the Axis powers, which included Germany, Italy, and Japan. And on the other side, we have the Allies, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, also called England, and the United States. The Soviet Union was led by Joseph Stalin and followed communism. England, led by Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and the US, led by President Franklin Roosevelt, both followed the ideology of capitalism. And you might be surprised to see that two capitalist countries allied with a communist country, because capitalism and communism are enemies. But as the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. These countries were willing to overlook their ideological differences in order to defeat the Axis powers. After the World War II was over, they went back to being enemies, and that led to a period called the Cold War, which you will study later. During World War II, fighting took place in two main regions of the world, and we call these two regions theaters. One theater was Europe. We call it the European theater. Most of the fighting in the European theater was between Germany and Russia. Since England is an island that is separate from Europe, it couldn't easily attack Germany. So for most of the war, Germany was able to move all of its troops over to the border with the Soviet Union over here. The other theater was the Pacific theater in the Pacific Ocean, and most of the fighting in this theater was between the US and Japan. Here is Hawaii, where Pearl Harbor is located. The fighting between the US and Japan in the Pacific theater mostly took place at sea or on small islands in the Pacific Ocean. And instead of trying to attack Japan, the US pursued a policy that's called island hopping. That means trying to take over small islands one by one. So a lot of the fighting in the Pacific was over these tiny islands. Some of them were just bits of sand and palm trees where no one even lived. But the goal was to get closer and closer to Japan little by little. All right, now let's look at some of the major battles of World War II. For each of the battles that I'm about to tell you about, fill in the info on your handout. The first battle is called the Battle of Midway. It happened in 1942 in the Pacific Theater and was fought between the US and Japan. The US won the battle and sank a lot of Japan's aircraft carriers, which are these really huge warships. The Battle of Midway was a turning point in World War II because Japan never totally recovered from their losses. Here is a map of Midway. You can see that it's a tiny island out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And this is what the battle looked like. It was fought by airplanes and ships. The next battle is called the Battle of Stalingrad, and it took place in the winter of 1942 and 1943 in Stalingrad, Russia, which is in the European theater. Stalingrad is a city in southern Russia, now called Volgograd. Hitler had attempted to invade the Soviet Union, but his army got stuck in a brutally cold winter. Stalingrad was one of the largest battles ever fought, with millions of soldiers, and 2 million of them died. This was a major turning point in World War II in Europe because Germany lost the battle and was forced to abandon their attempt to invade Russia. And from this point on, the Germans were on the defensive. Here's what the battle looked like: street fighting in a large city. By the end of this battle, the city of Stalingrad was completely destroyed. The next battle is called D-Day, and it took place in 1944 in Europe. D-Day was a really big turning point in World War II because it opened a two-front war and allowed the Allies to start advancing towards Germany. And this was the beginning of the end of the war. Let me show you some pictures and explain why this battle was important. So here's Europe during World War II. The red areas were under control of Germany, and as you can see, that included most of Europe. Since Great Britain, or England, was unable to attack mainland Europe, Germany was able to move most of its soldiers to the border with Russia over here. That's called a single front war. Germany only had to fight on one side. Now let's focus on this area of Europe, England and France. As you can see, there's a small strip of water separating England from the rest of Europe, and we call this strip of water the English Channel. It's about 70 miles across, and it separates England from France. And the part of France that's just across from England is called Normandy. On D-Day, British, Australian, and American troops gathered in England and attempted to cross the English Channel on ships and land in Normandy. This was really risky because the entire French coast was guarded by German soldiers, and they could easily shoot at any British soldiers attempting to land on the beach. But the Allies decided to do it anyway. Here's what D-Day looked like. Tons and tons of ships full of Allied soldiers sailing across the English Channel and landing on the beaches in Normandy in France. The battle was deadly, but the Allies succeeded. They were able to take over some land in France. And that was a big deal because now Germany had to fight a two-front war. It had to fight against the Soviet Union in the east, but now it also had to fight against the Allies in the west. The Allies were now advancing against Germany from both sides. The D-Day invasion was led by this man, Dwight D. Eisenhower, who would go on to become President of the United States after World War II. Like George Washington, Andrew Jackson, and Ulysses S. Grant, Eisenhower was another war hero who then became president. All right, the next battle is called the Battle of the Bulge. It was fought in the winter of 1944 and 1945 in Europe as the Allies closed in on Germany. This was Germany's last gasp. The Allies won. This was the deadliest battle for American soldiers. 19,000 of them died. Here's a picture of the Battle of the Bulge. It was fought in the snowy forests of Belgium in Western Europe. In 1945, Hitler committed suicide as the Allies closed in and Germany surrendered. And we call this date VE Day, or Victory in Europe Day. But the war wasn't over because Japan kept fighting in the Pacific. So while the war in the European theater ended, fighting continued in the Pacific theater. And the last battle I want you to know about is called the Battle of Iwo Jima. It happened in 1945 in the Pacific theater. Iwo Jima is one of those tiny islands that the US wanted to control as part of its strategy of island hopping. This wasn't a super important battle, but it led to a photograph being taken that became very famous and symbolized the US victory in the Pacific. You've probably seen this photo. It looks like this. This is from the Battle of Iwo Jima. Alright, that's it. Make sure that your handout is complete, and if you missed anything, rewind the video and look again. I'll see you in class. Bye, students.